Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming to our lecture series for the Visiting Artists Working Group. My name is Miguel Rivera, Chair of the Printmaking Department and a member of the Visiting Artists Working Group. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our guest, to our audience. I'm also honored to know that our guest personally, I know my guest back in 1995 when he visited my graduate studio at West Virginia University. I'm an admirer of his work and activism ever since. His curriculum is vast and a point of reference for artists and art scholars, as you will now hear. Hawk A.E.V. Edgar Heap of Birds was recently named an USA Ford Fellow in 2012 and a distinguished alumni at the University of Kansas in 2014. Edgar has studied at the University of Kansas Lawrence, Royal College of Art in London, Tyler School of Art in Philadelphia, and honorary Doctor of Fine Arts in Letters degrees that have been awarded by Massachusetts College of Art and Design in Boston, Emily Carr University of Art and Design in Vancouver, Canada, and the California Institute of the Arts in Valencia. Hyperbirds has exhibited his work at the Museum of Modern Art, Whitney Museum of American Art, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, Cheyenne and Arapaho Nation Reservation in Oklahoma, the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa, Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney, Australia, Documenta Castle in Germany, Orchard University Dairy in Northern Ireland, University of Art Museum in Berkeley, California, Association of Visual Arts Museum, Cape Town, South Africa, and Site Santa Fe, New Mexico, Hong Kong Art Center in China, Bandung Institute of Technology, Bandung, Indonesia, Grand Palais, France, and the Venice Biennial in Italy. The artist's works are in collections of the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York, Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, Pomona College of Museum of Art in Claremont, California, Denver Art Museum in Colorado, Museum of Contemporary Native American Art in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., Harold Washington Library in Chicago, and Belkin UBC at Simon Fraser University Gallery in Vancouver, Canada. Recent collections include the Metropolitan Museum of Art, British Museum in London, and MoMA and the Library of Congress. He has served as a visiting lecturer in London, England, Western Samoa, Chiang Mai in Bangkok, Thailand, Johannesburg, South Africa, Barcelona, Spain, Belfast, Northern Ireland, Norrköping, Sweden, Harare, Zimbabwe, Verona, Italy, Australia, Brazil, Singapore, India. He has taught at Yale, RISD, and the University of Oklahoma. And I can keep going on, but I think you're more interested to hear Edgar than myself. But I just have to say that his artistic creations and efforts as an advocate for indigenous communities worldwide are focused first upon social justice and the personal freedom to live within the tribal circle and as an expressive individual. Recently, Heap of Birds was elected to the American Academy of the Arts and Sciences in 2020. So without further ado, please help me welcome Edgar. Please, thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. Thank you very much. All of those accolades that were read off, or, the list, I just wanted to say to the students that might be watching tonight, all of those were pretty much done without a gallery. I don't have a gallery, and I never really had a gallery, and so those are all self-initiated exploits in the world, and I'm a big fan. I'm a proponent of just showing up. That's my theory. Just show up. Just you want to go to Africa and meet artists in South Africa. You want to go to Samoa, go to Australia. So anyway, all those things are self-initiated, and I really rely on the goodwill of other artists and the respect that we have for each other. So, Can we have the first slide, please, Grace? Tonight's talk will be a pretty far-ranging presentation, but I'll give you my origins of what means the most to me. And of course, I'm very unusual as an artist in the sense of I don't live in New York City, and I never did. I don't live in LA. I don't even live in Santa Fe, but I do work in Santa Fe often in my printmaking studio that I hire there, and I'll show you that later. So I do live near the Cheyenne Reservation. I've lived here since the 80s, and I lived on the reservation for over 10 years. Then I moved when I had children. I moved away to kind of better school systems for my kids, who are now 30 and 35 or so years old. I have a daughter, really wonderful daughter now who's 11. So anyway, we live in Oklahoma City now, but we're like 20 minutes away from the reservation. And because of the community of the Cheyenne Arapaho people, that's why I am in Oklahoma. That's the main reason. And so this image is one my wife, Shanna, who's a Navajo art critic, took this picture. This is the horizon looking west from Oklahoma City to the sunset. And so I want to start with this image, and I hope you can remember this image throughout the whole presentation, because the Cheyenne people and Arapaho people are from the prairie, the Great Plains, Northern Plains and Southern Plains. And so they're very involved with this horizon, and they see this every day. And when I lived on the reservation for those 10 years, I could see the sun rise and set every day on a clear horizon with no buildings or anything in the way. So anyway, this kind of flatness is what they make their artwork about, and they make offerings about the sun, the solstice, and I'll show you some of that work as well. So anyway, this is the first image to really consider is the sunset, the sunrise. Okay, next, please. I dedicate the talk tonight to indigenous women. They've carried us so far, very far, through many difficult times across this whole earth. And indigenous women are the backbone of all of our lives. And so this is my grandmother, Hoitzio, which is lightning woman. In English, her name was Alice Howling Crane, or Alice Redbird, and then later she became Heap of Birds, and that's her daughter, my aunt Dorothy. Okay, next, please. Alice married a young man whose name was Guy Heap of Birds, and he was when he was a little boy. You see his photograph on the far left with the headdress on. So that's Guy. That's my grandfather. And then next to him is Black Wolf with a pipe in his hand. In the center, Grace Big Bear, the female leader of the tribe of our family, and other members of the family. This picture is so old that one of my grandmothers wasn't even born yet. So anyway, I know this history. I'm part of this legacy, living directly. The man in the center, Black Wolf, his father was Many Magpies, Chief Many Magpies, and he was a prisoner of war in Florida. And I'll show you more about that later, after the Custer's massacre at the Washita. But the point I want to make about Black Wolf is Black Wolf was a headsman of the Elk Warrior Society. There's 4 main societies in the Cheyenne tribe, and now I'm one of the headsmen of the Elk Warrior Society. So I sit in the teepee where Black Wolf sat. So it's not like a distant relationship. We are in the place where we've always been. Okay, next, please. I've had really strong mentors as a young artist as well. Here is the sculpture Keeper of the Plains in Wichita, Kansas. And it was made by Black Bear Boson, who was a Kiowa Comanche artist. Okay, next, please. There's Black Bear. And so I was really, really fortunate as a young kid in Wichita, Kansas, to know about Black Bear. I wasn't big buddies with him. You know, he probably didn't even remember me, but I was watching him, and he let me in the studio every now and then to see him paint. This is a wonderful mural he made. And all the native people that were in Wichita, Kansas, came from Oklahoma primarily. And there's 40 tribes that were relocated to Oklahoma from across the country, and they were sort of like a sanctuary. The land was stolen from them in Georgia, Florida, Oregon, New York, Montana, and they were made to travel to this place called Indian Territory, later would be called Oklahoma. And so there was not much work there. Our families were cotton pickers. We picked cotton. Agricultural workers had a very hard time, lived in tents, no houses on the creek. Um, and so they moved to Wichita to become aircraft factory workers. During World War II and the Cold War, they had a lot of planes, Boeing aircraft, Cessna, Learjet, Beech aircraft. So Black Bear was also an aircraft worker, and so was my father. Okay, next, please. The most major piece of art that was created by Black Bear is called Prairie Fire, and it was celebrated worldwide. It gives a very, very strong impression of the kinship that fire, the sky, animals, people, the natural world, how they have this link together. So even though the fire is burning, it's a very beautiful fire, and everyone's fleeing the fire together. So this is in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This painting, I've got a print of it in my house too. But really wonderful painting. Okay, next, please. And that's a mural, probably his largest creation in terms of a painting. And I watched him paint this. He let me go into the studio one day and look at this. And Black Bear died in his 50s, medical procedure and so on. Terrible loss for all of us. But he wanted to make many, many more of these murals, he told me. And this was the first one and only one that he created. Okay, next, please. My first painting is pictured here. This is a 6 foot by 6 foot canvas. I was a student at the University of Kansas for 4 years, and I studied design initially, and then I moved into painting and did canvases, and I want to go back in terms of just memory to that first slide, which had the horizon. So I was already drawn to this flatness in a pictographic kind of way. Uh, and this is a painting I made, acrylic on canvas, 6 by 6 feet. Okay, next, please. I also did a lot of printmaking at KU, and probably my sophomore year or junior year, and I was involved with these kind of combining planes of color and shapes, uh, kind of launching together. And also this interesting part of it for me was how the shapes were offset. And so that's a serigraph about maybe 20 inches across. All right, next, please. As a young man, a young student, I was also mentored by other students, and so I was very, very fortunate to know a young painter who had studied with Dr. Dick West at Haskell Institute in Lawrence, Kansas. And Dick West Sr. is a Cheyenne elder. He's passed on now. Great educator and painter, a figurative painter. He educated a lot of Native artists at Haskell. So an artist by the name of Don Secondine, he moved on from Haskell, which is at that time, a 2-year institution, to KU, and we became colleagues. His wife was Kiowa, as was Black Bear Boson, and his wife's mother died. And so we were taking a landscape painting class together, me and Don Secondine, and we decided to make earthworks instead of easel paintings in the prairie. And we went out 2-3 times a week with the other students, and we did artwork. Well, we made kind of monuments, and so this was a memorial to his grandmother, or his mother-in-law, Kiowa mother-in-law. And next slide, please. There's detail. So at the top of the tree that we put in the ground, the big limb, we had a horse tail that was like woman's hair, and then we painted the wood, and we put stones around the bottom. We also put cedar in the center as a kind of a offering to the spirits. But I show this because this was probably in 1975, and of course I'm very well known for memorial pieces. I did a piece of the Walker about the 38 warriors that Abraham Lincoln executed. So I do a lot of memorial projects, memories of tribes and people. And I want to say that Don Secondine helped me understand the beginnings of that when I was still at KU as a student. Okay, next, please. Here's one of my constructions, as I called them. Um, and I was making the same kind of angular remarks about space, but this is about maybe 8 foot across and 6 foot tall, and all kinds of found objects I would find in dumpsters and create almost like stage sets in my studio. So pretty advanced work for a young undergraduate. Well, there was no grad program at KU at the time. So as juniors, we were very fortunate to get our own studio space that we could lock, and we worked at night. And there were two major scholarships. Well, there was one in the junior year and one in the senior year. You can win it twice, and I did. You compete with other students. So this work kind of propelled me, the paintings first, and I went to school in California over the summer in the Bay Area with the money, and then the second time I went to London. So it was very important support that KU gave me. Okay, next, please. The work became more fluid, and I feel like even to this day, it's important to remark that when you have an exhibition, you're really dealing with space. You know, you're working in a room, in a venue, and you've got to deal with a way to make that space your own experience. And I learned about that creating these constructions. Then I had a show. This is a little public library in Lawrence, Kansas, but I had shows in spaces, and I hung them myself and so on. Okay, next, please. This is one of the trees on the near the Cheyenne Rappel reservations, a little bit further south, Mount Scott. But of course, the natural world is always in my work, and I'm always observing it. My son Wookgim made this photograph. Okay, next, please. And I'll be showing you trees as we go along here, how the natural world engages my work. As I went to KU, and then I went to London, the Royal College of Art, and I traveled all over Europe, and they gave me a scholarship at the Royal College of Art to go look at collections across Europe, and gave me a kind of a handmade manual of what great collections to see. So I would get on the train and go to Florence, or get on the train and go to Amsterdam. We had a show in Edinburgh, where I've shown there like 5 years ago, but this is 1976. An amazing time, very dynamic time in London, on the King's Road, Fulham Road, and I lived there on the Fulham Road near King's Road, where the Sex Pistols began. And Francis Bacon was painting in Chelsea. Rocky Horror Picture Show was a theater event in Chelsea. All these things were happening. Very dynamic time for me. But I came back home early to immerse myself more into the Cheyenne culture, from being in this international realm of London, which is very cosmopolitan and very indigenous as well, because it has so many people from Arabia, Middle East, Hong Kong, Africa, all the colonies of the British Crown, so-called. This is my grandmother's moccasin, a print I made at a Cheyenne festival on the reservation in 1976, 77. And so Lining Woman made this beaded this. And so I made a rendition of it using my printmaking skills and demonstrated that on the reservation. Okay, next, please. I would then leave Oklahoma, having returned from London, back in Oklahoma for a summer, then going to Philadelphia to Tyler School of Art, and near New York City. And then I launched a new body of work, trying to find more of my own identity, which was hard, and I struggled. But the center shapes, there's 5 of them in the middle, and they're almost like a Frank Stella-esque, who I was aware of, but I wanted to work with that kind of same space. It also related to my printmaking before with the shapes, but I saw that as sort of this, for me, kind of a dead end of Anglo art, being more involved with, at the time, with more aesthetics and style rather than identity. Identity politics kind of came out of the 80s in New York and elsewhere, which I was very involved in, but this was before that. And so I wanted to have the white man art fight the Indian art. And so I put my grandmother's beadwork, pitted them against the Frank Stella-esque shape. Okay, next, please. And then, of course, the modern art shape lost the war. And I just began being more involved with my Cheyenne heritage, but more like exploring it. I didn't have control over it. I wasn't in the ceremonies. I was living in Philadelphia. I hadn't lived in Oklahoma very much before. So it began as a journey with language and text. Okay, next, please. Another mentor that really freed me up one night was at Tyler School of Art. And we were really, really fortunate to have Vito Aconci come to our program and give an amazing talk. He read some of his performance pieces, and a lot of it was sexual, sensual, some of it violent. Um, and it just gave me kind of a carte blanche to go forward and pursue anything I wanted to do. It wasn't about an aesthetic, particularly, it wasn't about a visual aesthetic. It was more about exploring your own identity and personality. So this is Vito, and he's there he has these masks that will go over your head, these mask pieces he did. This is called Terminal New York. It was over in Brooklyn, a military terminal. We were all there later after grad school, probably like 84, maybe 80, 83 or something. And I was in the show with him. And actually, I was hanging up the piece on the wall. Those are my words. And it's called Death from the Top, about the Washita Massacre. But I was hanging that work up. I'd come from Oklahoma. I was living in New Jersey, sleeping on someone's air mattress, having a tough time. But I backed up, hanging the work, and bumped into somebody, and it was Vito Aconci. So there's an amazing thing with my career where he was my mentor. He didn't know me, and then I actually literally bumped into him. We were in the same show. Okay, next, please. So that's one of the drawings. It's half of a drawing, about an 8-foot by 6-foot drawing on the wall. And so what I was doing in my studio as a grad student was kind of logging in information. I didn't have a way to resolve it per se as an art piece, but I was at the top on the right. You have the Philadelphia 76ers. Julius Erving was playing on the Sixers team. I would go down South Philly, go to the game. Haskell KU was at the bottom. All these things were going on in my life. But I just stirred them all into a piece. And so that was sort of a way to start to log them in and maybe someday make resolution, which I think I have resolved a lot of it now. But mainly it was like making a notation. Okay, next, please. When I had my thesis show at Tyler, after 2 years of work, I filled up 2 galleries. And the sad part of it, though, was I couldn't have any Cheyennes come to the show. We're in Philadelphia. My parents lived in Wichita, Kansas. My grandmother lived in Oklahoma. There were no Native people, particularly right there. But I got the idea that I should have my family present. So On some of the walls in the space, I wrote our names, our family names. So my grandmother, Alice, her maiden name was Howling Crane. And that moccasin print, the moccasin beaded piece that she makes, she called it Howling Crane. That was her grandmother. So she copied her grandmother's design. And then, of course, in the far space there of the slide, many magpies. That was the first way the cavalry described my great-great-grandfather as magpies. Many of them together. In Cheyenne, it's Moya and Haskus. So magpies, many of them together. And then later in English, many magpies. Then as he was taken prisoner of war by Custer, they called him Heap of Birds. Okay, next, please. So this way of notating my family became an image. So the text became an image, sometimes with letters I buy at the store, sometimes with my handwriting. This is called Fort Marion Lizards, kind of pivotal piece for me. That's me there in 1980, maybe 1979. And it's 8 foot by 8 foot, but I'm using wall board. So I worked on the wall in my studio at Tyler, and then I just stole the wall. I mean, when I left grad school, I put the wall on my Volkswagen bus and I drove it to Oklahoma. So then I started just working on walls. I would buy, it wasn't sheetrock, but it's called Homosote, but it was a similar fabric or material, and I would paint on it, draw on it. But anyway, this is a list of the prisoners of war that Custer had taken. And later they were all put in prison in Florida. And I found this list. Captain Pratt is the man who was their jailer. And so Heap of Birds, Bear Shield, Monimic, all the red words are my relatives. And you can see in the center it says Little Chief. And that's the name that Miguel said in the beginning of the talk. Haki Avi, that's my name. So my uncle Edgar, he had the same name. It goes back to Heap of Birds' nephew as a prisoner of war in Fort Marion, Florida, St. Augustine. Haki Avi was there too. Okay, next please. And within that spirit of language, I found, of course, that the words captured the native people because they didn't control it. They didn't describe themselves. They were described by the Army or the War Department. So here are the warriors taken after the massacre of Western Oklahoma. Okay, next, please. And so I find a bitter irony, really kind of a tragic description of history, in that the Fort Marion prisoners of war, the Cheyenne warriors, could have been called enemy combatants. And they were taken away from their families, held hostage, so they can make Oklahoma into a state. And the Army pummeled them, brutalized them, controlled them, and some even died in Florida. But today, the same tactic is used against enemy combatants in Guantanamo, Camp X-Ray in Cuba. So the so-called terrorists are enemy combatants. Again, without charges, without trials, without judges, without law, this republic can take you and incarcerate you. And these are images from Camp X-Ray in Guantanamo. Okay, next, please. This is a drawing made in prison by Bear's Heart, Cheyenne warrior. And a very, very brave drawing to create in prison while you're being abused by the U.S. government. So he made a drawing of horses, soldiers, and guns moving in a straight kind of linear passage across the prairie as they came to Oklahoma. Okay, next, please. And here is Oklahoma. I'm sorry, the slide's out of focus, but it's like from 1970. But the red earth, where I would return to after grad school, after being in New York and working there, showing there. So the red earth is very important always. Okay, next please. My career and my strategy, I don't know if you call it strategy, but I did work on exhibiting in New York, and I had a large exhibit there just the other day. I mean, a couple years ago. I've been work's been collected by MoMA, the Met, the Whitney. I'm doing a project with the Guggenheim right now, but excuse me. So my life isn't one sequestered in the reservation time or location. I went back and forth always. I think certainly Oklahoma, the Cheyenne Repo Nation, was the primary focus, but I didn't turn away from uh, New York or Stockholm or Paris or all these other places. This is the computer billboard at Times Square, and it was called Messages to the Public. It was a project from the Public Art Fund in '82. And so I was one of the artists chosen by Lucy Lepard, actually was one of the jurors, who a good friend today. She writes about my work. I invited her to write about my work. Tatistas, which is the word for Cheyenne, Chista, word for Cheyenne, said Vil, spider. So it was a 10 cell message, 10 different messages together about what the white man is in Cheyenne. He'll trap you, catch you. He's wrapped up. All these things he's done kind of to hurt the earth and hurt the people. But initially, they always called the white man Viho, and Viho is a spider. So I went to New York to tell the New Yorkers what the white man was on this billboard. And it was the only billboard in Times Square in '82. Okay, next, please. That was '82 and '88. They asked me to return to do a piece in City Hall Park. And so I went there as a foreigner again, um, not being a native person from New York. And so I would go there to talk about giving the floor to the Mohawk people, Tuscarora. I made 12 panels to put up in City Hall Park that were tribal panels. The first time I did this project in '88, and it was called Native Hosts. But the Mayor Koch's office censored, I think, about 8 of those, or maybe more than that. I think I had 6 panels that they allowed me to put up. They said it was too many Indian tribes to put up in the park. Okay, next, please. And then that became a methodology as I traveled the country and even in Canada throughout my career to this day, uh, as I'm often the foreigner, certainly in Canada, or this is Salt Lake City. So what I do with this tactic is to turn the province around backwards, subvert the state or location, the white man's place, and subvert it, and then to say, look at your past differently. If you could flip them around, they might see the past as a native power. The natives are the host of this continent. And so these young students here at University of Utah showed me that Nuchi is the real name for Ute. Ute isn't the name. So mostly the names that white people have for tribes are all mistakes. So these signs correct the mistake and give the credence back to the tribes. The next, please. I did a fairly recent project for Crystal Bridges in Arkansas, and there are 7 panels which give, again, the power of history and knowledge and the resonance back to the people that were there in Arkansas before it was called Arkansas. This phrase is Cheyenne, which gives you this message that all the tribes are the hosts, all the different tribes. So it really gives power or history to all the tribes. Okay, next, please. And I've done some in Oklahoma, a few. I don't work here very much, but Sooners, I was a professor at University of Oklahoma for 30 years, and I had to put up with the racist name of the school's mascot, which is the Sooner, which is to say that the Sooners were the land run people that took away the land and stole it before they were supposed to steal it. They stole it early, and they celebrate that. They have a wagon at every football game. They have a covered wagon, and they have guns, and it's just so obscene what they do in Oklahoma. So I made a panel with this Cheyenne on campus. I had 12 panels. For every professor I knew on campus that was Native, I made a panel. Okay, next, please. This is the newest piece. So Johnson County, I guess Community College, Kansa City, Kansas. They've asked me, the Nerman Museum has asked me to create a panel for their campus, installation, intervention. And so we work with Shawano. The Shawnee tribe, so-called Shawnee tribe, is one of the tribes, along with the Osage, that have been given history, credence to be hosts of that land in the past. And I researched the Shawnee and found the original word was more like Shawano, and they came out of North Carolina. So tribes are always evolving. And so I have a company that I work with in Oklahoma City that makes all my signs. And so here it is sitting on the table before it was shipped to Kansas City. And hopefully it'll be up maybe in the next few months. It'll be on campus. And it gives, you know, the students there and the citizens of that Johnson County and the college, you know, a perplexing moment where they might not read Johnson County properly. They might not know what that word is, and so they're stopped, and then they realize it, and then they look at things backward and look at things differently, and then they look at Shawana. What is that? And they Google it, and they realize it's Shawnee, and the Shawnee were then moved on to Oklahoma. They live in Oklahoma now, but so anyway, there's very, very thick layers of history and maneuvering these tactics, native hosts. So this is brand new for Kansas City. Okay, next, please. I've worked also in the Virgin Islands. I'll be in St. Thomas, St. John area next month. And so I have a series of panels for the Taino and other tribes of the Caribbean who are forgotten. The Middle Passage of slavery is what's kind of remembered, but the tribes are totally forgotten. So I give the cruise ship tourists something new to think about in the Virgin Islands. This is St. Croix. Okay, next, please. When I was there to deploy the work, I've been there a few times, of course, in St. Thomas, St. Croix, St. John, Puerto Rico. But I was really so proud to meet with the state legislatures, legislators of the Virgin Islands, and they invited me to the State House, and it was African Freedom Day, and so we were all there to celebrate the freedom of African people. And of course, there's a lot of intermarriage, and that was my point with the Taino too, that we have that history of being together as indigenous people. So I spoke at the State House, and I met all these great people. Some of them were artists as well. Next, please. I worked in Alaska. This is about 4 years ago. I did a major piece of native host panels for the Anchorage Museum, and they collected the host set. There's like 20, I think 20 Alaskan tribes, and we put them up on the front lawn, and there's kind of a wooded area in the middle of Anchorage. Next, please. But as I travel the world, you know, to do projects, I'm there to do the project, but I'm not going to miss a time to see this wonderful world where we live with and learn from it. Certainly, I mean that's so. I took a trip up the fjord, you know, the inlets and the boat, and and went to the glacier. Just an amazing sight of this ancient ice. And the water is so important to Cheyenne people because they go without it during the ceremonies. You know, we fast, but mainly it's water. If you deprive yourself of water in the summer of Oklahoma, you'll be very, very respectful of water if you don't have it. And you can live for 4 days without water, then you die. So to go to meet this ancient water that was frozen was such a privilege. And so they were able to pull a big chunk of the ice up out of the water and bring it onto the boat. And I blessed myself with that ice. So it was amazing. It's an amazing place, amazing moment. Okay, next, please. In Oklahoma, as I said, the place where we have the ceremonies without the water is a place where over 30, almost 40 tribes have been displaced. They've come from, as I mentioned, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, and so we have the Trail of Tears, and they were made to walk to Indian Territory, which later became Oklahoma. So I did a big project for the Atlanta College of Art near the High Museum in Atlanta, and I made pyramids there from Macon, Georgia, Etowah Pyramid, different pyramid sites in Georgia, and no one knew about them. They didn't even know pyramids were in Georgia. It was so horrible, the ignorance. But I made signs about the Trail of Tears, and I put them up along Peachtree Street. So there were like about 10 sets along the main thoroughfare of Atlanta about walking. And I was sort of in a tongue-in-cheek fashion saying that if you want to do power walking, you're exercising during the lunch break, why don't you try walking to Oklahoma? You'll be very fit by the time you get to Oklahoma. Okay, next, please. I've also worked extensively in Africa, in South Africa, and also in Zimbabwe. I've been into Botswana as well, and took my family, went bush, which I always do. But these two drawings are historical. On the left is the Zimbabwean eagle from Great Zimbabwe, which I visited a couple of times, and then the Cheyenne eagle on the right from a shield. And so I really wanted to say more about the racism, not just about the white racism, but there's racism within Native life. And so the lower rung of economy in this hemisphere is fought over. Nobody wants to be on the lowest rung. So between African Americans and Native Americans, who's the poorest? Nobody wants to be called the poorest or the most unfortunate. And so there's a lot of friction between blacks and natives today, and a lot of intermarriage too. But then there's discounting who's better than the other. Horrible. Uh, so anyway, so I wanted to really talk about that friction. So I met an artist, one more than one, but I had asked an artist to come from Cape Town to RISD, Rhode Island School of Design. I was an artist in residence at the RISD Museum. I was teaching a course at RISD. And then I had been in Zimbabwe. So I wanted to take the eagles from both places and have them commingle and respect each other. And I thought if I could get that to happen, then maybe the people could too. Next slide, please. So we made a big project in the RISD Museum. There were 4 artists. Cynthia Ross Meeks is not in the picture. I'm sorry, she's not in the picture, but she's a Wampanoag artist and African-American artist. In the center, Everett Tulloch Whedon, who was Narragansett and also African-American. And then on the far right, Themigosi Goniwe from the townships in Cape Town. And we all got together and shared ideas. And I met Thembi in Africa, in South Africa, in Johannesburg. And then we worked together and made work about eagles. It was called Eagles Speak. And then there's a brochure and there's a film. If you check the RISD Museum website, you might be able to find that. And it was wonderful. It wasn't easy. It was sort of a difficult project, but I was able to have us all kind of communicate together and go back. And we took the whole show from RISD, which they didn't help do any of this, but we took it back to Africa. And we worked with Narragansett youth. And so I gave the Narragansett kids a show in Africa. We took their work back with us. They had made work about eagles as well. Okay, next, please. And this is one of the trees, a very important tree in Western Oklahoma. And so that's someplace on the reservation near my home. And I want to talk about the trees a little bit, how they affect my painting. Okay, next, please. I painted also in Maine, Bar Harbor, with Kippy Stroud. It was a great, generous person to bring artists to Maine, to Bar Harbor, and work. It was great to be by the ocean and also by the forest. Okay, next, please. These are my Noof paintings, to do something 4 times. And these are smaller. These are like 36 by 44 Noof paintings. Okay, next, please. And I was also working in Bali. My wife and I were in Bali, and also Lombok and Java. And I was recently also in Sumatra. But that's the Bali volcano. Okay, next, please. I go to the water and snorkel with the fish. And I met weavers in Lake Toba, the Batak tribe, wonderful weavers that made great artwork. I always network with artists as I travel. Next, please. So the reef itself in Java, in Indonesia, in Bali, these places affect my work and the Noof paintings. And so the trees were part of the language. Now the fish are, and I was in Hawaii last week. And again, those fish and the reefs and the water, the color affects what I do. Next, please. So these Noof paintings were made like in 2010, I guess. Next, please. This is my little studio on the lanai in Oahu, maybe like 3 years ago. I'm painting kind of on the back porch by the ocean. Okay, next, please. And this is last week in Honolulu. And I'm working on this painting. It's not done, but I'm painting again on the lanai, looking out across the Pacific. The next, please. The painting on the right there, I'm standing next to it. This is at the St. Louis Museum of Art. More of a vintage painting, like 1994. Next, please. And I've been able to exhibit with Bryce Martin. The work has been collected by the museum, and great to have that kind of recognition and response back and forth. Okay, next, please. And Joan Mitchell also. Okay, next. My sculpture in Denver is based on the wheel, medicine wheel in Wyoming, and so that's a diagram of the rocks and stones. So again, the nature is in the middle of my work, whether it's in the islands or in Wyoming. Okay, next, please. On the left is the contemporary lodge where the ceremonies take place. On the right is the ancient stone monument of Bighorn Medicine Wheel. Okay, next. My sculpture for the Denver Art Museum is called Wheel, and we're reinstalling this next year. It's been moved to a more prominent space, and it's an autobiographical historical piece, 50 feet across, and the same forms that hold up that lodge are utilized here, the fork trees. Okay, next. A big part of all this work is to transmit it to the youth. And so that's my daughter. Her name is Hoetzio, Lightning Woman, Desba. And we're in Denver maybe like 3 years ago, and I'm showing her the tree with her name, many magpies on the tree, heap of birds. Okay, next. I was working also in China, in Beijing, and a student made me a wonderful poster, which was pictured here at Beijing Normal University. So the work transmits back to Africa, to China, elsewhere. Next, please. And I had to, give them my belief about ideas about the Statue of Liberty. They had brought that out during the Tiananmen Square before the massacres and celebrated liberty. But I said, don't believe Miss Liberty to China. Next, please. This is a brand new print from last month in Santa Fe. The Statue of Liberty has its back turned toward all the Indians. This is a 22 by 30 inch monoprint I made in Santa Fe. It's for a book project in New York. Okay, next, please. These kind of concepts about the earth, the natural world, the medicine wheel, I take them back to the elders in the Cheyenne Nation. And you had about 50 tribal elders come together. No, 250, I think. And we made canvases about the medicine wheel. Wonderful day in Watonga, Oklahoma. Next, please. I led a native group in Oklahoma itself. It was called the Makers. Next, please. We have a book, Makers Alliance, and photography, beadwork, poetry. And so when you don't have a network within your community, I encourage everyone to make one. Okay, next, please. And then the cover of Art in America. This was done, what is that, 2017. I was commissioned to do the cover. And so we turned America backwards to have them look at their past differently. So every magazine that went out had America backwards. And so Do Not Dance for Pay, a very important message to tell to all the native artists and artists in general. Don't dance for pay. Do something that means something, that has meaning for yourself. Next, please. My monoprints are fairly well established. My printer, I have 3 printers, and Michael McCabe is my primary master printer in Santa Fe. It's Michael there on the right. Okay, next, please. That's the print on the glass, plexi. I'm writing backwards with plate oil on the glass. Okay, next, please. Another printer that I work with, I like, is John Greco, Josephine Press in Santa Monica, LA. Okay, next. Charles Cohan, Charlie at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. He's the chair of printmaking at Manoa. And I was just there the other day on the campus, but I didn't print any work, but I was painting, but I go there often to work with it. Next, please. This is Genocide and Democracy. This is my daughter Desmond when she was about maybe like 8 years old. And this is the University of Emily Carr University in Vancouver. Okay, next. And some of those prints from Genocide and Democracy, Point of Sword, Who Owns History. Next, please. These are all 15 by 22. Murdered Women, Pilgrim's Pride. Next, please. The major event was my show at PS1 MoMA at Surviving the Active Shooter Custer, and that's the didactic. Next, please. And this was the piece from Santa Fe. It was shown at Santa Fe Biennale about Custer. And so I make a ghost print with every project I do now. On the right are the ghosts, on the left are the primary prints. These are all 22 by 30 inches. So it's about 30 feet if you put them together, 30 by 7. And so what I find is that we're really like the ones on the left, where we're very bright, vivid, understandable, clear. America sees us more tainted or tinted or very light in terms of understanding or invisible. And so I make that image on the right of the ghost prints. And this was collected by the MoMA. It's in the MoMA collection. The next, please. that was shown at PS1, and Michael and myself at the opening in Santa Fe. Michael McCabe, Navajo printer. And next, please. So here's a shot of the primary prints in out of the surviving active shooter Custer. Next, please. And the ghost prints. And now we're using different paper. You'll see later. Okay, next. This is the health of the people is the highest law. This has also been collected. This piece here. Next, please. And at the plas, he was bonus veins. So the plasma, all these health issues was what we dealt with. When you give your plasma, if you give your plasma a lot, then you're called bonus veins by other Native people. Okay, next, please. This is more humorous, more about romance. This is called Sweetheart Songs. And it's a series of 24 smaller monoprints, 15 by 22. And these are all songs sung after the powwows are over in the Southern Plains. They're all lyrics. Next, please. This is Fort Supply, the fort that was made to supply Custer to attack the Cheyenne Rebel people in western Oklahoma. And this is also in the museum collection as well. Next, please. One of my favorites here is Indian Home. My reflections on my childhood with my grandmother and life on the reservation area. These are the primary prints. Indian Home. Okay, next, please. And those are the ghost prints. So within this sequence, we're having different kinds of paper, gives you different kind of color, resilience, and so we're changing up the paper also now on the ghost. Okay, next. This is Columbus Day. I did research in the Dominican Republic. I was in the DR, and I went to Columbus's son's home, and so I've had a lot of kind of venom toward Custer. I mean, not Custer, but Columbus. And so I made a lot of messages about that. Next, please. And so the Columbus Day, and this piece is available. This is still available. Okay, next. And what I keep saying Custer, I'm sorry, the slip of the tongue, but Columbus did to the tribes if they didn't find the gold. Okay, next, please. And those were all done. These are all done in Santa Fe, these large prints, 30 by 22. This is a water is your only medicine. I really like this piece a lot. So it's about 30 feet by 7 feet, ghosts on the right, primary on the left. Next, please. So these all deal with water issues and the spirit of water. Okay, next. This is why is immigration dictated by foreigners, dealing with the Trump era and the horrible tragedies of his issues with immigration. So on the left, you have the primary. On the right, you have the ghost prints. Okay, next. What he did to the kids in those holding cells. Okay, next, please. And then this one's also available. These are all available, these last few prints. Our red nations were always green. So this was all done about ecology and a native response to ecology. On the left, there's 24 primary, on the right, 24 ghosts. And my website is eheapofbirds.com, and all these are up there. I can't talk about them like I'd like to, we don't have enough time. So if you want to pull up the website and look at, you can click on every one of these pieces and look at them more closely. Okay, next, please. So that's the primary for our red nation where I was green. And next should be the ghost. Next, please. Yeah, the ghost. So I really like what happened. Can we go back, please? I really like what happens like down below on the brown one where it almost disappears totally. So this is what I'm talking about. So this is how America sees Native people, just barely, just barely showing up. Okay, next. So we're coming to the end of the talk. The sage is how we live, the spirit, the ceremony. This is sage from the summer in Oklahoma. Next, please. And natives survive in spite of the empire. Certainly, we do. We will. And the last slide, I believe. The family, my daughter, Desmond Lanning Woman Heap of Birds, Shanna Ketchum Heap of Birds, so a very brilliant writer, a PhD from University of Middlesex, London in performance art studies. I received my honorary PhD from Emily Carr, who were up there for the ceremony to receive the honor. Okay, I want to close now with a 3-minute video. We can have that now. And then we have questions from the chat. I always talk about how painting doesn't ever stop. And the painters never quit painting, even when they're not painting. I mean, they're going to go back and make that progression extend further. They should be exploring with the medium, you know, and reorganizing the configurations and the exploration and investigation. You got to articulate the ideas through a form, exploring new ways to articulate those shapes. The earth doesn't care about humans. The earth has nothing to do with humans. And it's fine on its own, and it's been fine on its own. And you can kind of damage a little bit things, but only as it pertains to humans. Like if you mess up the ozone, we get more sunburn. Or if you poison the water, we can't swim in it or drink it. It's spun before, it's going to spin after. But people relate more to each other. And they think they're getting something done because they relate to each other. And then someday the earth will tilt a bit and get too close to the sun, and there'll be no more people here. And that's why the tribes have so much humility. We pay homage to where we are. That's what we do every day on this planet. Is that we're not bigger than it or more smarter than it. We're happy to be kind of hosted by it. Well, we're on the allotment, the north allotments, Arapaho family allotments, my mother's and her relatives. I moved here in the 80s, the early 80s, and my great-grandmothers, they were very generous and allowed me to live at the top of the hill, and it didn't have any running water or no electricity, and it was a 3-room kind of old house. But living here was a real privilege, and learning from the land, the weather, the animals, and again, that wasn't easy, but I think it puts me in a good position to always be comfortable on the planet. You know, like I'm comfortable wherever we are. But I made a lot of the work. Actually, the work that the Whitney collected was made out here. You know, and a lot of the work that I've got being shown in museums and so forth, major museums in the world, was made out here, and it still resonates. Like every shape should be an entity when you're painting. To me, like every shape you make should be like a little animal spirit, or it should have that weight. It's not an embellishment. It's like this tree is something, and you know that you look at a tree, you touch it or whatever. It's like you gotta be like that tree. It's gotta have as much status as anything out here, you know. And then you overlay it, overlay it, and then you get this. Like here, you get this strata of all this visual beauty, but it comes from being in this environment for years on a daily basis. It's become a language, a visual language for me, a visual language that can be repeated, and I can explore anywhere, but it comes from the experience of being on the land as a young man, and just continuing that relationship, in the work as well as in physicality, but also in the work. It's gonna the homage to the earth is gonna be present. As an artist, they need to live in a place that they can learn in. They need to be somewhere living on this earth that they pick, that they can learn, not the hippest place or the funnest place or the most money place, but you want to learn where you're sitting and sleeping every night, where you need to learn. So it trickles down into being something very significant if you understood where you're sleeping, where you're living, and be citizens of that place, and take care of the spirit of those places. Red bird. So that was a video by Nick Corot, Corrrao. He's a filmmaker and professor in the Tampa, St. Pete area. Okay.
Thank you so much, Edgar. I think this is great. We have a few questions from the audience. And the first one that I think is important to mention is by Caitlin Robinson. She's asking if you have any advice on how to respectfully add motifs into her artwork, because she is partly Cherokee and she doesn't know much about it, and she wants to be respectful to the culture, and she doesn't want to be misread by anything that she puts out, because everything that she knows at this point is through the books.
Okay. Well, when I was in some ways I was similar, not so much, but as a young man, to not be immersed in the culture, and so I found it important to go back and live, come back and learn, and generate sweat equity, and to kind of help. I mean, I guess my understanding is that when I was coming back, I thought everybody knew everything, and I didn't know anything. And then when you get back, sometimes the elders need help. They don't have helpers. It's not valued like you might think it would have a lot of value in the community. But a lot of people have their own lives to lead, and they don't really take on the importance of the history or the ceremony. So anyway, I really advocate that everybody go back and help, rather than try to make something for yourself out of what you might gather. It's always about like my grandpa used to say, if when you go to visit somebody, if you can't take something, don't go. If you have nothing to give, don't go. Stay home. If you can't give, you don't want to go somewhere and take. So all my projects, I give things to artists, or I go trade, or we trade, ideas. And so I think that's what you need to do, is go back and give something to the Cherokee Nation, because they need help. They're devastated by COVID. There's all kinds of problems. So going there and seeing them and helping them, rather than using them as subject matter. Yeah.
Yeah, she's also asking if you have a favorite play, a piece in your work.
A favorite piece. Wow.
Yeah.
Um, I like all the, all the work. I like making the prints, but I like making the paintings. I was painting all last week in Hawaii, so I like making those little paintings. They're little wooden panels, so there's big ones like 10 feet tall, but I enjoy just working on what I feel like doing, rather than letting the market dictate what I should be making. I just make what I want to make.
Yeah. London Williams is asking if what were some of the challenges and triumphs experienced in the Eagle collaboration? How do you navigate cultural differences?
One thing, you have to gamble. It was a big gamble, to do that. I did that like in about 4 weeks or 6 weeks, maybe 6 weeks. I did that, but I was traveling to Africa before that and after that. But I think just having people join you in the quest, to understand. And then they didn't fall focus like I thought they would focus. And one of the guys went off and went to the Bermuda, went to Bahamas for a while. I couldn't find him. And our show is coming up. He's in the Bahamas, but he was working on Pequot slaves that were sold to slavery from Massachusetts in the Bahamas. And so anyway, we're all working on things, and it came together though. But I think you had to be led though. That's the main part of it. So the eagle, I met the eagle in a river in Botswana, and I saw this eagle, and he was fishing, and I thought, oh, there's eagles in Africa. I didn't know. I'm so naive. I thought there weren't any eagles, and so the eagle led me along as I went. So I'm always looking for the spirit leader. I guess a spirit citizen we're talking about, but I think you need to have a spirit leader. Find it and then follow it.
Thank you. And also, there's another question right here. Susan Seidler, are you still making any pastel drawings?
Not so much. No, I help them out every now and then. If we were missing one, I might remake one. But I injured my arm making hundreds of those, so I couldn't make any more. And so that led me off to do the big marker drawings, and then that led me to the printmaking. And so the necessity to change your physical attributes of how your methodologies lead you to different kind of projects. So there's been a lot of interest in the drawings, though. They're almost all collected by museums now. Every one of the large installations I ever made. So from like 1991, and I see them all the time, and I like them a lot. So I don't know if I would make some more, but I gotta take care of my arm.
I have a question from a student, I think. What advice would you give to a young artist who have a disconnect with their cultural heritage, who don't have familial ties or relationships to ground them to their racial identity?
I would think you would have to go pursue it. Try to go and invest your time. Again, not to make the quest be about your benefit. Like, what can you add to the community you have love for? How can you help them, rather than what can you use from them to embellish your identity? What can you do to go back and help? And then through that helping, you'll gain your identity. I mean, they'll share with you, they'll welcome you if you're there to help. But if you're there to take, then you'll never be in it.
I have a question from my colleague, Michael Schoenhoff, and he's asking since your signage is similar to land acknowledgements being used heavily today by many sites and institutions, can you share some thoughts about your land acknowledgements?
Well, it's so ironic. I made those in '88, and now everyone's making land acknowledgements. But I think that's progressive. But again, you want to be able to give away Indian scholarships if you're a school, not just say this land is so and so. So why don't you give all these Native kids free tuition? You have that ability, right? So again, not just hot air, not just what you can look good saying those things, but what do you do physically? What do you do, to help the people that you're honoring? So that all the venues where I've made these Native host pieces, I could have made work about myself, which most artists always do. They just make stuff about themselves. They're the most important thing. But I give the floor to all the other tribes. I mean, I don't take it for myself. I mean, those kids in Utah were so proud of that sign. All those young students were so proud. No one ever gave them anything to say. So it's so important to have a physical kind of offering as a method, rather than a taking or like. And I do think sometimes the land acknowledgement is sort of a boilerplate that goes in the beginning of things, but nothing ever happens for the people.
You're correct. I hope that's changing now. I have another question from Ames Walsh. He or she is asking if, for somebody who creates work that focuses on activism and cultural knowledge, how do you find the balance between personal and impersonal connection to your work?
Well, that's a great question, and that's what I sort of brought up earlier about different kinds of work. We have a big mistake that we pursue from the Eurocentric masterwork, so that the market has presented that to everybody, and so you see this pattern of work from every major artist, and it's the same work done over and over and over in different ways, nuances, but they had different ideas, but they weren't allowed to say them. Here's the Monets, here's the Cezannes, whatever, and you can recognize it because they were excluded everything else that they might have done. And so I think it's so important to have, for me, to have like 4 different methods of working, and then you can express yourself depending on how you feel. Some days you might want to paint, some days you might want to write some word pieces that are about sensuality and sexuality. Some days you might want to make a radical political statement. Some days you might want to make a sculpture, work with communities. And I think you got to do all those things, and don't worry about how will it be marketed, because the
Yeah.
market is made for the buyer. It's not made for the artist. That if you're an artist, you're fighting it every day. You fight that market. It limits you. It's not that, and never going to help you. It's for the collector. The market is. You know.
So you're talking about 2 different venues, like you as a creator, and then the other person, the other as the receiver. Because I have another question by Maria. She's asking about she's not indigenous, but she worries about being respectful of indigenous people and their history, because she doesn't know a lot about them, and she doesn't want to operate on ignorance and misinformation. So she's asking if sh about your advice on learning more and developing an understanding of the culture.
I think see that's a great question, and it goes back to the time of feminism. And I know there was a funny little moment there, and we all know the actor Alan Alda, right, from MASH. That guy that was in MASH, Alan Alda, and so he declared himself a feminist, and all the women said, "You can't be a feminist. You're a man." You know, and he said, "Well, why can't I have empathy with the struggle? If you actually are honest about your own relationship to that." And so certainly you can be a feminist if you're a man. No matter what kind of man you are, you can join that kind of empathy, but you've got to include your own history. So I think when someone is not native and want to deal with native life, you probably got to put your own life in there. How is your ignorance? How is your questioning? Let's make a painting about that rather than the Indian painting. Make a painting about you misunderstanding maybe that, But like I did with the signs. I made the signs because I'm not from Utah. So I make a sign about being a foreigner in Utah, not an Indian, not a Cheyenne thing. See, so anyway, you have to implicate yourself in the story, I think.
Yeah, I remember a conversation that you had with us in grad school, and then you were talking about using the trickster question, reversing the cards and asking people with the same question they were asking you. And this is one of them that I'm going to read. Do you consider yourself a Native American artist or a contemporary artist?
Uh,
Lewis Norman.
yeah, sure. Yeah, is that Lewis?
Yeah, Lewis Norman. Yeah,
Well, hello, Lewis. He asked me that the other day, actually.
by Susan Seidler. Yeah.
Yeah, great. That's cool. Um, well, I'm at this point in my life, I can say, I mean, I'm an elder in the tribe. I can take you through the ceremony. We can actually heal people. We can bless people. We can bury people. So That's the most important thing we do. But people don't know that, or you can't go do that. You can't read a book about that. You can't join a club about that. You can't go to school about that. So I'm a Cheyenne leader first. Obviously, I'm a father. I have my daughter who's 11. So I have a really strong footing in my nation, and so that covers everything. So I'm people know me as this guy that can help their boy go through the ceremonies, and before ever an artist thing, who cares about that? Like, they want to know, well, can you take my boy through for 4 years and he won't die? And I said, yeah, I can. I'm pretty sure I can. And so therefore that covers the native perspective of how you exist on this planet. So you got to think about Indian artists. What is that? You got to think about being an artist. There's that. Then you can be yourself and express yourself globally, and whatever you make is what you want to make. But I think it all hinges upon having your own position in your own nation and your life you've lived. You've, like, I've danced in the ceremony with men that have grandsons. I've danced with them too. I've danced in 3 generations of men in over 30 years. So they know who I am. But from what I spend it all in the place. I give them my time, and so that's how you really earn your freedom, in a sense, because a lot of other native artists spend their time trying to be a native in their art, and that's a big mistake. That's crazy. Like, there's no native in art. That's art. The natives in the sweat lodge, natives in the fire, natives in the fast, natives in the thirst, under the sun. It's not in a gallery. So if you don't
Yeah,
know that, that's too bad.
yeah, you're kind of describing like how white people have a difference between like style and in aesthetic, politics. And I think that there's a huge difference between the two, between being objectified and being the maker of art for other purposes. So you're talking about a second. So I have another question. Rebecca DeBay, our colleague, she's asking, how are you thinking about the use of the grid and the display of your prints?
Well, that's another great question, and I don't like it. I don't like the grid, really, but I can't change all that. I mean, I wish I could change that. Maybe someday I'll figure out how to do that, but I don't like the linear, limited box. I'm more of a circular kind of guy, or a spiral, so. But we ship things in crates and squares, and paper comes in rectangles and all this stuff, So I think when you get inside of my prints, it's very fluid and it's like watery, and it's not like a grid inside of there, But the overall factor, it looks like a big grid piece, and I wish it didn't, But I kind of see it disappear once you get them all up on the wall. Um,
Mm.
so I feel like there's some freedom in there, but I think it's I'm still trying to kind of co-opt that a bit, and that's where Lewis's question is a great question, because that's the artist trying to make that methodology, mine, to speak to my content, and the artist has got to do that. The ceremonial leader can't really do that, or the Indian doesn't do that. Just the artist does that. So I'm certainly I think I'm well trained contemporary artist, so I'm going to work like Art in America, flipping Art in America, flipping the word America backwards, and putting it, making them, asking them to send out every magazine backwards. We couldn't do Art in America backwards, because then they said it would be a different magazine title, and the U.S. Postal Service wouldn't deliver it. We could have done the whole word back. So anyway, that's the artist that Lewis is talking about. The artist is trying to figure that out and give it a spin, so I'm very involved with that. Yeah.
I'm gonna go to the last question. It will be by Daniel Garcia, or Daniel Garcia, if we use the pronunciation correctly. What are the benefits of artists avoiding artist labels? Has an artist label ever hurt you or your community?
Oh Oh yeah, yeah. It's very good. That's why I worked hard on organizing a cooperative in Oklahoma, because we were fighting all of the tourist art, which is still mainly what we got in Oklahoma, the tourist art for Native people. So you've got to make your own new method or new rubric. So where are we at now? Are we concluding, or are we?
Yeah, my video went out for a second.
Okay, there we are. There we are. Okay.
Yeah, it went out for a second, but I think we're about the time, and then if anything comes up, I think I will say just the questions. So thank you so much, Edgar, for your time and for your insight on everything that you do, and then we thank you for everything that you've done for us tonight.
Well, I was talking to Lewis Newman the other day, and I told him I used to come over to the Art Institute and wander around when I was undergraduate from KU. I'd come over and I look in the studios and see what was going on, you know. So it's kind of cool to come back now and speak to that place. You know, I haven't been there for 30 years, but I used to wander around and snoop around and see what's going on at the Archer School. So it's kind of nice to be invited back.
We'll come back anytime.
Okay, all right.
And let us know so we can host you properly.
Okay, all right, good. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thanks for everybody for being here tonight with us.
All right.